There could probably be some debate over what the required components of an email are. Some might say the actual body of the message isn't really required, although without it, our message would be limited and more like a text message than an email message. Some of us have probably also received a message that didn't have a subject line. Again, in my opinion, not a great idea, but it is possible. But for our discussion, we're going to stand by the claim that there are 3 required parts to an effective email: the address, the subject line, and the body of the message itself. Now, believe it or not, based on my experience, we actually do need to invest some time discussing addressing and subject lines. So here we go. The most obvious thing that we absolutely must have to deliver an email message is someone we have addressed it to. There isn't a single email system in the entire world that will let us send a message without addressing it, and that just doesn't make sense. So I don't think we really need to explain it too much either. But what we do need to do is work through the many ways that Outlook allows us to address a message. So to get started, let's go ahead and create a brand new email message. We're going to do that by clicking or tapping New Email from the left side of the Home tab. And that, of course, is going to open a new email form. The first and most common thing we can do to address a message is to just type it in if we happen to know what it is. Every email address in the world has to have an @ symbol and a period or a dot. Everything else is kind of up for grabs, but those 2 elements must be in place because that's the standard around the world to identify who it's going to and what their domain is. We're going to be sending this particular message to Susan, who happens to be part of our training company. She's a marketing person. But at the moment, we can't quite remember if her last name is Jenkins or Jensen. And if it's Jensen, we're not sure if it's S-E-N or S-O-N. Well, Outlook to the rescue, because when we need to address a message, we can simply click or tap the To or the CC buttons on the left-hand side of the window. This brings up the Select Names dialog box. And the first thing to recognize is that there are many different address lists that Outlook provides. What you actually have access to will depend on the system that you have and what you're connected to. From the drop-down on the right-hand side of the dialog, we can see that we have several of them. We have mbrooks@pckeys.com, and there we have a contact list, which is actually inside of Outlook, and we also have something called a global address list, or a GAL. The global address list is something that's set up on Exchange Server, and it's typically run and managed by IT or maybe even HR. The beautiful thing about the GAL is that we don't have to maintain it. As people are hired and fired and change their names, all of that is handled by somebody else, but we can access it. And that really is good news because we don't want to have to keep track of everybody that moves and changes their name. This is generally where we find all of the internal information for our company, not only for staff or employees, but also possibly for clients and vendors that the entire company shares. Our contact list is something that we keep track of in Outlook, and that's more of a personal nature or for our personal vendors or clients. So we'll go ahead and choose one of these address books. That will then display all of the people that are available, but if we still can't find the person we're looking for, we might want to perform a search. The more you know, the better. The more specific you can be, the better. But if we click or tap in the blank spot under Search on the left-hand side and start typing, and then press Enter, it should narrow down our list and select the one that we want. In this case, we only have one Susan, and it happens to be Susan Jensen with an E. This is really helpful in a larger organization where there may be 10 or 20 or 100 different Susans. So again, as much information as you can provide is going to help narrow that down. We can also see in this window that we get other pieces of information that will help us identify which person we're looking at. Things like their title, their phone number, their location, possibly even their office and department. This depends on how it's set up on Exchange Server, but this really does provide us a way to make sure we're selecting the correct person. Now, once we have the person identified, we can do a couple of things. If we simply double-click on a name, it adds it to the bottom. By default, double-clicking will add it to the To box. If, however, we select the name and then come down, we can click on a button to add it to CC, or to BCC. It's easiest if we can just type an address and get on with creating our message. But sometimes we don't know the address. And even if we do, typing things manually always carries the risk of typographical errors. And with email, if it ain't correct, it ain't going to get delivered. So accuracy is key. And using Outlook's various address lists through the Select Names window can solve all of our issues.